Lenox Avenue, Harlem, summer 1952. Bumpy Johnson sat in his usual booth at Small's Paradise, counting the week's numbers money, when the front door opened and every conversation in the club stopped. Not because of gunfire, not because of cops, but because a woman in a blood-red dress just walked in, and Bumpy Johnson, the man who'd stared down Lucky Luciano without blinking, felt his hand freeze over the cash. His lieutenant leaned close and whispered, "Boss, should I?" Bumpy cut him off with a look that said everything. "You don't pull a gun on Stephanie St. Clair. You don't threaten her. You don't even look at her wrong." Because the Queen of Harlem didn't just run numbers. She ended careers, destroyed empires, and made grown men disappear with nothing but a phone call and a smile. And what happened in the next 10 minutes would prove exactly why Bumpy Johnson, the most feared gangster in Harlem, was absolutely terrified of this one woman. 1952 was supposed to be Bumpy's year. He'd survived Dutch Schultz, he'd negotiated with the Italian mob, he'd done time in Sing Sing and walked out with his empire intact. At 46 years old, Bumpy Johnson controlled every numbers bank from 110th Street to 155th. His runners collected bets from barbershops, beauty salons, and street corners. His enforcers made sure nobody skimmed. His connections with the five families meant protection from both the law and rival gangs. Bumpy was untouchable, except for one problem. One woman who refused to bow, refused to negotiate, and refused to disappear no matter how many times Bumpy wished she would. Stephanie St. Clair, the French-speaking Martinique-born numbers queen who'd built Harlem's illegal lottery from nothing back in the 1920s. She was 55 years old now, but age hadn't softened her. If anything, it had sharpened her into something more dangerous than any man Bumpy had ever faced. Because Stephanie didn't fight with guns. She fought with information, with influence, with a network of loyal operators who'd walk through fire for her. And she had something on everyone, including Bumpy. When Stephanie walked into Small's Paradise that night, she wasn't alone. Behind her came two women, both dressed in elegant suits, both carrying ledgers. No bodyguards, no weapons. Just three women walking into a room full of Harlem's most dangerous criminals like they owned the place. Because in many ways they did. Bumpy stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket, his face a mask of careful respect. "Madame St. Clair, this is unexpected." Stephanie stopped 3 feet from his table, her eyes scanning the money spread across the surface. She didn't smile. She never smiled in business. "Mr. Johnson, we need to talk, privately." Every man in the club looked at Bumpy, waiting to see what he'd do. But Bumpy just nodded, gestured to the back office, and followed Stephanie like a student called to the principal's office. His lieutenant started to follow, but Bumpy shook his head. This was between him and the Queen, nobody else. The office was small, dimly lit, with a desk covered in betting slips and a wall safe hidden behind a painting of Duke Ellington. Stephanie sat in Bumpy's chair without asking, opened one of the ledgers, and pushed it across the desk. "You've been moving into my territory," she said quietly. 125th and Lenox, 132nd and 7th, 140th and Frederick Douglass. Those are my corners, Bumpy. They've been my corners since before you got out of Sing Sing. Bumpy remained standing, his hands in his pockets, his voice measured. Those corners were going independent. I just brought them back into the fold. For protection. Protection, Stephanie repeated, her accent making the word sound like an accusation. From who, Bumpy? From you? The temperature in the room dropped. Bumpy had been in 1,000 negotiations, faced down killers and cops and politicians, but something about Stephanie St. Clair made his instincts scream danger. Because she wasn't playing the game he knew. She was playing a different game entirely. "Look, madam," Bumpy started, but she raised one finger and he stopped talking. One finger. That's all it took. "Let me tell you a story," Stephanie said, closing the ledger. 1935. Dutch Schultz comes to Harlem thinking he can take what I built. He sends his men to my corners. They beat my runners. They steal my money. They threaten my life. Everyone tells me to run, to hide, to make a deal. But I don't run. I don't hide. Instead, I write a letter to the district attorney detailing every police officer on Schultz's payroll, every judge he bought, every politician who took his money, and I send copies to 3 newspapers. Bumpy knew this story. Everyone in Harlem knew this story. Stephanie had single-handedly destroyed Schultz's political protection, turning him from an untouchable gangster into a wanted fugitive. Within weeks, Schultz was dead, shot in a Newark Taman. "You think that was luck, Stephanie?"
continued. You think the mob just decided to kill him on their own? I made sure the right people knew that Schultz was now a liability. I made sure his protection evaporated. I made sure his own organization saw him as a problem that needed solving. She leaned forward. I didn't pull the trigger, Bumpy, but I loaded the gun, aimed it, and made sure someone else would fire it. That's power. Real power. Bumpy felt sweat forming on his forehead. He'd heard rumors about Stephanie's methods, but hearing her admit it so casually was something else entirely. Now, Stephanie said, you're a smart man, smarter than Schultz. You know you can't just roll over me, but you're trying anyway, thinking that if you move slow enough, careful enough, I won't notice or I won't care because I'm getting old. But here's what you don't understand about me, Bumpy. I don't get old. I get more dangerous. She opened the second ledger. This one had photographs clipped to the pages. Bumpy recognized them immediately. His meeting with Frank Costello, his payoff to Captain Henderson of the 32nd Precinct, his sit-down with Meyer Lansky at the Copacabana, his shipment of heroin coming through the Red Hook docks. How? Bumpy's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat, started again. How long have you been watching me? Since the day you came back to Harlem, Stephanie said simply. You think you're careful, Bumpy, and you are. But I've got photographers you've never seen, informants you've never suspected, and connections you don't even know exist. I know about your deal with Luciano. I know about your arrangement with the Genovese family. I know about the policy banks you're running through the dry cleaners on Lenox Avenue. She closed the ledger. And I know about your wife. Bumpy's face went stone cold. Don't. I'm not threatening Mamie, Stephanie said quickly. I respect marriage. I respect family. But I'm making a point. You want to know why I'm not afraid of you? Because information is better than muscle. Knowledge is better than guns. I can destroy you without ever raising my voice or firing a shot. And you know it. That's why you're sweating right now. The silence that followed was suffocating. Bumpy sat down slowly, the fight draining out of him. Because she was right. Completely, utterly right. He could have Stephanie killed. He had the men for it. But the damage she'd do on her way out would burn his entire empire to ashes. She'd set up a dead man switch. He was sure of it. Evidence packages ready to go to the FBI, to the newspapers, to the mob bosses who'd see him as a liability, just like they'd seen Schultz. What do you want? Bumpy asked finally. The same thing I've always wanted, Stephanie said. Respect. You stay out of my territories. I stay out of yours. We run parallel operations. No interference, no expansion, no war. And if I agree, then we both keep making money. You keep your relationship with the Italians. I keep my independence. Harlem stays peaceful. Everyone wins. And if I don't agree, Bumpy asked, though he already knew the answer. Stephanie stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the doorknob, looked back at him with eyes that have seen everything, survived everything, and would outlast everything. Then you'll find out why Dutch Schultz died screaming in a bathroom, why James Mooney's gambling operation collapsed overnight, and why Vincent Cull's entire crew turned on him within a week. I don't make threats, Bumpy. I make consequences, and you're smart enough to know the difference. She opened the door, her two associates waiting in the hallway. I'll expect your answer by Friday. Have a pleasant evening, Mr. Johnson. And just like that, she was gone. Bumpy sat alone in his office for 20 minutes, staring at the wall, running through scenarios in his mind. Every option ended the same way. If he fought Stephanie, he'd lose. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, systematically, she'd dismantled everything he'd built. His lieutenant knocked softly, entered when Bumpy didn't respond. Boss, everything okay? Bumpy looked at him, and for the first time in years he laughed, a genuine, exhausted laugh. You know what's crazy? I faced killers, mobsters, corrupt cops, and federal agents. I've been shot, stabbed, beaten, and locked up. But that woman right there, she's the only person in New York City who genuinely scares me. Friday came. Bumpy sent word to Stephanie through one of her runners. The territories would remain separate. No interference, no expansion. The Queen of Harlem had won without firing a shot. The partnership lasted until Stephanie retired in 1965, moving to California with her fortune intact. By then, she'd outlasted Dutch Schultz, Lucky Luciano, and most of the mob bosses who tried to muscle into Harlem. When she died in 1969 at the age of 72, Bumpy sent flowers to her funeral. The card read simply,
To the only gangster who ever beat me, with respect, Bumpy. Because in a world of violence, muscle, and guns, Stephanie St. Clair had proven something that Bumpy Johnson never forgot. The most dangerous weapon isn't a pistol. It's a woman who knows where all the bodies are buried and has the receipts to prove it.